You are listening to TALRadio, the information and entertainment arm of the Touch a Life Foundation. On TALRadio, the Touch a Life Foundation shares stories of kindness and information on how we can connect those around the world who might be in need of assistance with those parties who are generous enough to offer it. Today on the Robert Hicks Show, we have Julieta Mendez. Julieta is the Associate VP for Programs from American Jewish World Service. And thanks for coming on to TALRadio, Julieta.
Thank you so much, Robert. I'm happy to be here representing the organization.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to hearing about your organization. As I understand it, American Jewish World Service is a New York City-based 501c3 nonprofit organization that is basically an international development and human rights organization. AJWS is a tax-exempt organization, and if anybody were to make donations to AJWS, those donations are tax-exempt. And but let's just start off at the top. I understand that AJWS, obviously from the name, it's a Jewish organization, but it's my understanding it's not all about simply supporting exclusively Jewish people, correct?
That is correct, Robert. In fact, I'll say that we do not support necessarily the Jewish community. The mission of AJWS is really to realize the human rights and end poverty in the regions where we work, which is Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. And so we're a Jewish organization because we were started by Jews and by the belief that, people wanted to stand together and support those that were living in the most oppressed places in the world. And so really the organization characterizes itself as Jewish because of the values that it brings forth in the work that we do and how we accomplish this work.
Great. So Julieta, what is your background and how long have you been with American Jewish World Service?
Thank you for that question, Robert. So I'm actually Mexican-American. I was born in the States. My family's from Mexico. I've been working at AJWS now for 6 months. And as you mentioned earlier, I mean, this, even though AJWS is a Jewish organization, we not only support non-Jewish folks, but also our staff, as Exhibit A shows, is not all Jewish, right? I myself was raised Catholic, and in fact, I come from an indigenous background, so I'm indigenous Zapotec from southern Mexico, which interestingly enough is also one of the regions where AJWS works and one of the populations that we support. So we're an incredibly diverse organization. We have people working for us from all over the world. And one of the beliefs of AJWS, which is something that I find very attractive about the organization, is that we truly feel that the solutions that we support to help others do not come from us and should not come from us necessarily, meaning, headquarters here in New York, but rather we accompany the communities where we work in helping them, design their own solutions, propose their own, recommend, their approaches and recommendations, and we support them in that way.
So how did you wind up at AJWS? Just curious, like background-wise, experientially, what your background is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been working in the field of, both international development and in the field of nonprofit in the social sector now for almost 20 years. Wow. Personally, as I mentioned earlier, my family is indigenous Zapotec from southern Mexico. And even though I was born in the States, I've always had a very, very close connection with that part of my culture and have always felt very compelled to do work that allowed me to support my community in one form or another, or more broadly speaking, the indigenous community in general, right? So not just in Mexico, but also indigenous communities around the globe. So in fact, when I first graduated from grad school, a few years back now, I won't tell you exactly when because I'm going to date myself, but a few years back, I did start working for another foundation, in Southern California that was doing similar work, in Latin America. And then that kind of really helped me discover the field of philanthropy and just how much philanthropy was starting to contribute to international development, which 20 years ago was still a relatively new thing. And that just kind of kickstarted my career in international development and has eventually led me to now be at AJWS, continuing to, support this kind of work, which I find incredibly rewarding.
Very neat. We're looking forward to hearing some more details about what kinds of work. But just, can you give me kind of an idea about like the size of the organization? Do you know what the number is of like employees or participants?
Yes. We are, I believe, and Tanyanika can also correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that right now we are just a little over 100 employees that work for AJWS. As I mentioned, we were established 37 years ago. And we have since donated approximately $453 million over the past 37 years to support thousands of activists and social change organizations around the world.
Now, is AJWS affiliated with any other similar organizations, like part of a network of any kind, or is it pretty much a standalone organization?
So we are a standalone organization. We do have partners that we collaborate with. But institutionally, as a legally constituted, it's just us, AJWS, and yes.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I asked that question simply is, with our listening audience being global, sometimes an arm of your organization or a partner organization might be more in their neighborhood as opposed to being a self-standing singular organization like you are. That way, when we're asking for the help, they go to the right place, and we make sure we get it to your organization. So you mentioned earlier the scope or the geography that AJWS covers is pretty much Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, right?
That's correct, yes.
You guys do any work here in the U.S.?
The kind of work that we do in the U.S. is really more about, more focused on advocacy, but primarily advocacy for international laws that impact, either international development and our country's kind of involvement in international development work. But we don't really focus on any domestic issues.
Very good. So I was looking at the website for AJWS and noticed that the work is kind of focused on some central issues, and I'd like to just kind of talk a little bit about them, if you don't mind, just to kind of see, maybe you can tell us a little bit about it. I mean, I'll just kind of go through the list if that's okay, and if I leave anything out, feel free to mention it. But one is humanitarian and disaster response.
Yes, that's correct.
So what kinds of work have been done there? I noticed it has to do with things like helping in the recovery from things like earthquakes, hurricanes, and epidemics and the like, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Whenever there's, we work right now in about 18 countries in the regions that I mentioned earlier. And whenever there is a humanitarian disaster, either in these 18 countries or in what we call the Global South, which really are developing, low-income and developing countries, in the South, that's when we intervene with either grants that the organization makes or special appeals, where we reach out to our community of donors to contribute to these situations situations, and we've responded to a variety of disasters that have happened in the last several years. More recently, of course, with no surprise, we had a huge campaign to respond to the pandemic, to COVID-19, where to date we've given about $5 million to partner organizations in these 18 countries to really help the organizations that we work with, to help them weather the COVID storm, support institutionally as organizations, but also to support the communities where they operate and make sure that communities had a viable means of subsistence during the COVID during the pandemic. That's just to give you one example. But in addition to that, we've responded to humanitarian disasters. For example, in Nepal, we've responded to the hurricanes that have happened in Central America, and so many others, countless more situations.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I noticed that civil and political rights is a key initiative also for AJWS, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? I noticed it said fighting for civil and political rights around the globe.
Yes. So again, here we support approximately 159 organizations that are, as you said, fighting for civil and political rights around the world, promoting justice under the law for all, and the right to really be heard, to vote and participate in political life. And I think one of the things that we really that we're really kind of fortunate to have here in the U.S. is that we have a democratic government, right, that we can rely on, that we know is going to function in a certain way. And unfortunately, that's not the case in many countries across the globe.
That's the exception.
Exactly. Yeah. Democracy is under attack, especially right now. Authoritarianism is on the rise. You have corrupt and abusive leaders that violate the fundamental rights of citizens, through political repression, increasingly cracking down on those who speak up for their rights and for the rights of others. And as always, the populations that are affected by all of this the most are, women, our youth, indigenous groups, and especially, religious, ethnic, or sexual minorities. These are the folks that are frequently excluded from civic and political rights, political life, and from kind of basic freedoms. So in order to kind of, counter all of these challenges, we support organizations that are building movements that are fighting for democracy and for human rights, right? And so these activists essentially empower people to learn about their rights, to speak out against corruption, right? To as well as, against violence and abuse. People are educated to use the ballot box as a vehicle for change, and organized to advance human rights at a very, very local level, as well as, national and global. But I think, as we like to say at AJWS, I think our secret sauce is really that we offer accompaniment to some of the most marginalized groups in these countries that are not only forgotten many times by the international community, but are also forgotten by their own governments, both national governments and local governments, right? And so the work that these folks do really at the local level is incredibly critical and important for the survival of these communities.
I noticed that, talking about persons' rights, I noticed that sexual health and rights is a focus. Also supporting organizations that empower women, girls, and the LGBTQI plus community, right?
That is correct. Yes. And there we support about 157 organizations that are empowering these communities and helping them live with dignity and safety, and especially with good health. And similar to what I just mentioned, I think that's also another aspect of many countries around the world where a lot of these populations do not have basic human rights, right? And again, we're talking about young women and girls. We're talking about the LGBTQI plus population. Some of the patriarchal values faced in many of these countries are very pronounced and fuel discriminatory laws and practices that prevent these populations from enjoying the freedom to make their own decisions over their health, their education, their professions, their futures. And unfortunately, the statistics are staggering, right? In nearly 70 countries around the world, 2/3 of LGBTQI plus people have endured violent attacks, and simply being gay is a criminal offense, and sometimes these things are punishable by death, so, what we try to do is to really, to support activists that raise their voices against all of these injustices, and try to make sure that these populations are able to have basic human rights.
Yeah, something I saw the website even mentioned ending child marriage. I mean, that's something very specific, but I saw where it said that roughly 12 million girls around the world each year are affected by that.
That's correct. Yeah. And these are very young women. I mean, young girls, like, less than 18 years of age, that have very little, say over how their lives are going to turn out. Right. And are not able to really make any decisions about, what they want to do and educating themselves and things like that. And then become victims of, gender-based violence and whatnot. So we have some amazing staff at the organization that are entrenched in all of this work. And, not only, in New York, but we also work with, some consultants on the ground that are able to also inform us of the challenges that are being faced by our partners. So it's really it's not for the faint of heart. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I certainly see that, and I see land, water, and climate justice. I mean, so much work to do in what we've already mentioned, but land, water, and climate justice also is an initiative for your organization, right?
Yes, that is correct. And here we support 132 organizations that are working to slow climate change and protect the land, water, and natural resources that rural and indigenous people depend on for survival. And one of the things that we say a lot is that most of the time the victims of climate change and everything that's happening end up are not necessarily the folks that are causing the detriment, right? And so they're kind of they're kind of just on the receiving end. And so what can we do again to help them weather all of these no pun intended, or maybe pun intended, weather the storm, right? So there's in this case the organizations that AJWS supports essentially stand up to fight for the human rights and the future of the planet, so to speak, right? They're addressing massive inequities that leave poor and rural communities as I said, to bear the brunt of the climate crisis. And they're essentially focused on trying to stop harmful development projects, protect the land, water, forests, and natural resources that these communities depend on for survival, fending off illegal land grabs and winning legal battles, confirming that the land can't just be used for mining or development without the consent of the people that live on these lands, and in many cases have lived on those lands for for hundreds of years, right? And also preserving access to clean water, stopping the destruction of forests, promoting sustainable regenerative excuse me, I can't say that word, regenerative uses of natural resources, including rivers and oceans.
Wow. It's mind-boggling how much your organization is working toward. And then on top of all that, as you mentioned, here in the U.S., you've got a role of advocating for progressive U.S. foreign policies will help to accomplish those other initiatives also.
That is correct, yes.
So much to do. By the way, let me remind our listeners that we are talking with Julieta Mendez. Julieta is the Associate VP for Programs from American Jewish World Service, AJWS. And we're really delighted to be talking with Julieta and learning about AJWS here on the show today. Let's talk about, if we can, by the way, when I was saying that I wanted to touch on the different areas that your organization covers, you're proving to be an encyclopedia on every category, which I'm very impressed with. Let's talk a little bit about you're very welcome. Let's talk about how our listeners can help out AJWS. I noticed there's a lot of different, if you go to the AJWS, American Jewish World Service, their website is ajws.org, www.ajws.org. Lots of information there because that's where I got it, and the bits that I know. But one of the things that's very impressive is how many ways there are for people to help out AJWS. Let's talk a little bit about that if we can. Do you want to any that you want to particularly highlight, or I could even kind of mention some?
Yeah, I mean, again, I can start off by, talking about our donor community, which I mentioned earlier. Similarly to our staffing structure and to the organizations that we work with, we don't just, welcome contributions from the Jewish community, but also really open it up to anyone who wants to contribute to the work that we do. And that's something that folks can do directly online. As you said earlier, the website is www.ajws.org/donate. Folks can also just call us directly. Robert, I'll send you the details so that you can also, include them on the post of this recording. But, the number there is 1-800-889-7146. Folks can call and make a donation that way, or they can also just mail us a check, right? The good old fashioned way. Our address is also found on the website. But in addition to that, we recognize obviously that not everyone has the ability to give money. There's also ways for people to just take action by signing a lot of the petitions that we put forth through some of this advocacy that we do here in the U.S. that I mentioned earlier. And on our same website, if you go to /take action, you can find several of the campaigns that are currently, taking place right now. And, and if there's something obviously that resonates with you, you can sign these petitions and help us urge our leaders to take action on some of the work that we're promoting. And then if the other option is if you wanted to also kind of stay connected to us and you want to, kind of see our work in real time, you can always connect with us on social media. You can like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram, or you can sign up for our email list. Again, same website /sign up will take you directly to our email list. For folks who maybe want to, invest in a longer term, or make a longer term investment to the organization rather, folks that might want to leave a lasting legacy. We also have information about planned giving, if that is something that is, folks might want to consider. And for that, they're welcome to reach out to us at the organization and speak to someone directly.
And all these ways are detailed, like you said, on that donate page. You can make an honorary or memorial gift. You can donate by mail or by phone. There's a gift matching situation there. There's what's a donor advised fund?
A donor advised fund is basically if you as a donor have a significant amount of funds that you want to contribute to the organization, but you also have a very let's say a specific issue that you want to support. You can set up a donor advised fund, either through your bank or directly with the organization, I believe.
To be more targeted,
to be more targeted. It's essentially like setting up a mini foundation within an already established organization.
There's also, some people may not think of some of these things. You can make a gift of stock that you may own, and as Julieta mentioned, the planned giving, your estate plans.
That's correct.
Also be directed toward leaving that kind of a legacy, if you will. And it's just so much work to be done, but so many ways that you can help out. And by the way, your organization is headquartered in New York City, but I noticed that you also refer to other cities across the U.S. country, cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C., as also being kind of hub cities for your network, if you will. But just a curiosity, what would surprise most people about your work, if you can think of anything something that most people wouldn't know this, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I can tell you what surprised me, coming into this role and coming into the organization. And I think anyone who's very familiar with international development work would probably maybe agree, is that it's the level of flexibility that this organization and the level of trust that this organization places on the partners and the communities that it works with. It's very challenging to do that, especially when you're an established organization in the U.S., because there's a lot of due diligence that goes into the work that we do. We have to make sure that everything is. We report on all of the activities that we fund, right? And so the level of trust that AJWS places on its partners to really allow them to guide the process and the solutions that we support, I think it is pretty admirable, and it's not always, it's a risk taker, this organization, and I think we have to be, because of the work that we do. Not many foundations in the U.S. Really take the level of risk that we do in order to support this kind of work. And I really admire the organization for that. I think it's absolutely necessary if we in fact want to affect real change in some of these in the communities that we work.
Yeah, so I want to get just a little personal on this, if I may, Julieta.
Sure.
Within your heart, working within American Jewish World Service, what does it do for you personally in how you feel about it, your connection to it, and your passion? Tell our listeners a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's it do for you?
Well, I'll start by saying, my role involves a couple of things, but one of the aspects that I oversee is I basically oversee the humanitarian response team, within the organization. So what that means is that, whenever there is a crisis that, happens, like, for example, on Monday with the earthquake that happened in Mexico, or with, Hurricane Fiona, or other floodings that have taken place earlier, or the food crisis, actually, the food shortage that's happening right now in East Africa that we've recently launched a campaign for. When things like that happen, my team is the first to respond to that, right? We have to be, essentially tracking the situation 24/7, making sure, checking in on our partners, making sure that they're okay, and trying to get information from them about, what the needs are going to be on the ground. And based on that, make decisions about how we're going to support, right? And to me, especially, given the times that we're living in, to be able to like literally wake up and have to, jump into those kinds of conversations, like that's happened to me already, is very rewarding, because it makes me personally feel like I am directly contributing or doing something to help the world right now during these times. And especially, as I mentioned earlier, to help some of these communities that personally I feel very connected to, right? Because of my own personal background. And
that's neat.
Yeah, and it's very cool. I honestly, I can't imagine myself doing anything else. I always say that, I'm a bit of an artist at heart too, and I always say that other than art and music, this is probably the other great career that one can have, to be able to have at your disposal, through an organization like AJWS resources, that then you get to decide how those resources are shared with the rest of the world. It's pretty phenomenal. I feel
that's got to be really neat.
Very much so.
There's a fulfillment that goes beyond anything you might earn, there's an experiential thing. There is just feeling good about making a positive difference. And the reason I ask that question all the time is because basically the Touch of Life Foundation is all about helping organizations like this. And I do want to ask our listeners to go to download the TAL Giving app. It's TAL for Touch of Life. TAL Giving app. It's a platform to help organizations like the American Jewish World Service and so many others. If you go to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, you can download the app that is called TAL Giving. And whether you are a giver or someone that wants to be a donee, someone that needs to receive donations, you can register your organization, you can register yourself as a donor, and it's all about, taking people in need and connecting them with people that have the goodness in their heart to essentially be able to provide services to kind of, make it a better world, and all of us give back. Julieta, this has really been a very interesting, and again, that web page that you mentioned earlier, it's at ajws.org, right? www.ajws.org, and I think you said /donate, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, and you'll see such a list of ways that you can help out this organization. I can tell you AJWS is not hard to find. You can connect, I should say, with them on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. There's also an AJWS blog if you want to stay abreast of the stories that they're experiencing, and it's also good. So, Julieta, my time with you today was well spent, and boy, did you prove to be a bunch of information for us to learn about AJWS, and I thank you for coming on TALRadio today. Absolutely,
Robert. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I have to say the time flew by.
I know it did.
It definitely did. And, if there's ever anything else that we can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out.
And hopefully maybe we don't just make this a one-time occurrence. We can certainly check in again and kind of get the update and all that kind of thing, and make sure that AJWS is kept in front of our listeners. And I do want to, I'm Robert Hicks, and with TALRadio from the Touch of Life Foundation. And I do want to thank you, our listeners, for spending time with us today. And most of all, for your generous nature in following Touch of Life and the TALRadio. Please do stay tuned with us on TALRadio for additional uplifting stories and ways that you can get involved.